At her father-in-law's funeral, she stood beside her husband of 18 years, holding his hand while he wept in front of friends, relatives, and business associates who believed they were witnessing a family bound together by grief. 3 weeks later, he had a process server hand her divorce papers at the front door. 2 months later, he married her best friend in a private ceremony where many of the same people sent flowers and congratulations. Then one phone call changed everything. Because the man they had buried in a modest casket, the quiet widower who drove an old sedan and wore the same watch for 20 years, had a secret no one knew. He was worth more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. And the woman they had humiliated, discarded, and replaced was the only person named to receive the fortune. What looked like a love story had been a calculation. What looked like loss had been a test. And what looked like the end of her life was only the beginning. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand how a woman could lose her husband, her closest friend, and nearly every certainty she had in a matter of weeks, we need to go back long before the funeral, long before the money, and long before anyone knew they were being watched by a man who rarely said much, but noticed everything. We will call her Olivia. Friends described Olivia as the kind of woman people lean on when life becomes difficult. She remembered birthdays, visited hospitals, brought meals to grieving neighbors, and kept private promises even when no one would have blamed her for walking away. She had married young, choosing love over security, and spent most of her adult life helping her husband rebuild from one disappointment after another. His name, for our story, will be Ethan. He was handsome in a polished way, intelligent enough to impress people quickly, and ambitious enough to always feel dissatisfied. He had ideas, plans, business models, investments, partnerships, and endless reasons why success had almost happened but somehow slipped away. Each time he failed, Olivia adjusted the budget, took extra shifts, refinanced debt, or sold something valuable to keep the household steady. Each time he promised the next opportunity would change everything. There was one person who never fully believed Ethan's promises. His father, whom we will call Henry. Henry Carter was a widower who lived in a neat but modest home outside Hartford, Connecticut. He mowed his own lawn, bought generic groceries, and wore jackets that looked 20 years old. Neighbors assumed he had a pension and little else. Ethan often spoke about him with embarrassment, calling him stubborn, outdated, cheap, and impossible to impress. What Ethan did not know was that Henry's modest life was a choice, not a limitation. Public records later revealed ownership interests hidden through trusts, partnerships, and holding companies connected to commercial buildings, manufacturing investments, energy contracts, and international shipping stakes. But in those years, almost no one saw the full picture. Henry preferred it that way. Well, Olivia had always treated Henry with warmth. She visited on holidays even when Ethan stayed home. She brought groceries when weather was bad, helped sort medication after a minor surgery, and listened patiently when Henry told long stories about the years before she knew the family. She never asked him for money, never hinted about inheritance, never pushed Ethan to repair their strained relationship for financial gain. That mattered more than she knew. Henry noticed details others missed. He noticed who called only when they needed something. He noticed who remembered birthdays. He noticed who spoke kindly when no advantage existed. To some, he looked like a silent old man sitting at the edge of family dinners. In reality, he was studying character in a room full of performance. Olivia's closest friend through much of adulthood was a woman we'll call Vanessa. They met in college, survived heartbreaks together, shared apartments briefly, and remained close through marriages, moves, and career changes. Vanessa was glamorous in a way Olivia never tried to be. She dressed sharply, moved confidently, and knew how to become the center of any room without appearing to seek attention. She complimented generously, laughed at the right moments, and remembered enough personal details to make people feel seen. To Olivia, she was loyal, fun, and fiercely supportive. To others, she could be harder to read. Some women admired her confidence. Others sensed a competitiveness hidden beneath the charm. But friendships built over decades often carry immunity from suspicion. Olivia trusted her the way people trust landmarks. She believed Vanessa was simply part of life itself. As the years passed, Ethan and Vanessa grew comfortable around each other through family dinners, birthdays, vacations, and emergency calls when Olivia needed help. Nothing about it looked unusual at first. That is often how betrayal enters a life. It arrives dressed as normalcy. Ethan would joke with Vanessa during cookouts while Olivia handled dishes inside. Vanessa would text Ethan to ask what gift Olivia might like for Christmas. They coordinated surprise parties, planned group weekends, and exchanged messages under practical excuses no one questioned. If anyone had suggested something improper, Olivia would have laughed at the idea. She trusted both of them more than she trusted many relatives. That trust would later become the sharpest wound. Henry, however, was not so easily reassured. During one Thanksgiving dinner, he watched Ethan check his phone repeatedly and smile at messages while Olivia carved turkey in the kitchen alone. During a spring barbecue, he noticed Vanessa and Ethan lower their voices when Olivia stepped outside. During a family photo, he saw hands separate a fraction too quickly. None of these moments proved anything. But people who have built empires by reading motives understand that truth often announces itself quietly before evidence ever arrives. Henry said nothing publicly. He simply watched more carefully. Then came the illness. Henry's health declined over a winter marked by repeated hospital visits and private consultations no one else fully understood. Ethan visited sporadically. Work, stress, travel, and scheduling conflicts always seemed to interfere. Olivia visited often. She brought soup, organized appointments, handled paperwork, and sat beside Henry during long afternoons when he spoke less about medicine and more about regret. According to notes later referenced by his attorney, Henry once told Olivia, "The hardest part of growing old isn't weakness. It's realizing how many people love what you provide more than who you are." Olivia reportedly answered, "Then the ones who stay matter more." Henry never forgot that sentence. When Henry died at 78, the funeral was elegant but restrained. Many attendees assumed the family's means were ordinary. Ethan cried openly, leaning on Olivia's shoulder as though grief had restored tenderness between them. Vanessa stood close enough to comfort both. Olivia noticed little things that unsettled her. Shared glances, a whisper that stopped when she approached, Vanessa touching Ethan's arm too familiarly near the reception line. But funerals distort perception. People are emotional, disoriented, exhausted. Olivia dismissed her unease as grief speaking too loudly. She focused on supporting her husband, greeting guests, and surviving a day heavy with loss. She had no idea she was standing inside the final performance of her marriage. Olivia had no idea she was standing inside the final performance of her marriage. Grief has a way of making people overlook details they would normally question. She saw Ethan crying and assumed sorrow. She saw Vanessa comforting him and assumed loyalty. She saw the exhaustion on her own face reflected in church windows and assumed the strange distance she felt was simply the weight of losing a man who had become family. Henry had never been easy, never openly affectionate, never the sort of father-in-law who embraced warmly or praised often. But he had been consistent, thoughtful in private ways, and far kinder than many people understood. His absence left a quiet hole. Olivia spent the days after the funeral handling thank you cards, casseroles, flower deliveries, and legal notices addressed to Ethan. She expected the family to draw closer through mourning. Instead, everything began moving in the opposite direction. 3 weeks later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, a knock sounded at the front door. Olivia was still in slippers when she opened it and found a man holding an envelope. He asked her name, confirmed the address, and handed over divorce papers with the practiced detachment of someone who had delivered heartbreak before breakfast many times. The grounds were brief and cold, irreconcilable differences. Olivia read the pages twice before understanding them. Ethan was not at work. He was not traveling. He was in a hotel across town and had already moved clothing, documents, and valuables the previous night while she slept. By the time she called his phone, it went straight to voicemail. By the time he finally answered hours later, his voice sounded rehearsed. He said they had grown apart. He said he needed to live honestly. He said there was no one else. He said many things that afternoon. Almost none were true. The first week after abandonment carries a particular kind of humiliation. People call to ask polite questions while searching for gossip. Neighbors pretend not to stare. Mutual friends suddenly become difficult to reach. Olivia moved through rooms still arranged around a man who no longer lived there. His coffee mug sat by the sink. His shoes remained under the bed because he had taken the newer pairs. A jacket still hung near the door. She kept expecting him to return and explain some temporary breakdown. Instead, 2 weeks later, photographs began appearing online. Ethan on a beach in Miami. Ethan smiling at a rooftop dinner. Ethan holding hands with Vanessa. Ethan kissing the woman Olivia had called her sister for nearly 20 years. The captions spoke of courage, new beginnings, and finding happiness after pain. Pain for whom was left unsaid. Shock often arrives after evidence, not before it. Olivia stared at those images until details sharpened into certainty. This had not begun after the divorce. It had not begun after Henry's funeral. It had likely not even begun that year. Memories she once considered harmless now reassembled themselves into warnings. The business conference Ethan said required an overnight stay when Vanessa had also been visiting family nearby. The girls' weekend Vanessa canceled because of migraines on the same weekend Ethan claimed to be meeting investors. The private jokes between them that made no sense because she lacked the context. Betrayal does something cruel to memory. It takes years once treasured and forces them back through suspicion. Olivia found herself re-examining birthdays, vacations, and holidays as if searching crime scene footage for clues hidden in plain sight. Friends divided quickly. Some vanished to avoid choosing sides. Some offered sympathy, but quietly kept attending dinners with the new couple. A few confessed they had suspected emotional closeness between Ethan and Vanessa for months, though none had warned Olivia because they didn't want to be wrong. That phrase would haunt her. Many lives are damaged less by cruelty than by the silence of witnesses unwilling to risk discomfort. Olivia's nights became sleepless loops of anger and self-interrogation. How had she missed it? Had she become boring, tired, too forgiving, too practical, too easy to take for granted? People often internalize betrayal as proof of personal failure when it more accurately reveals the character of those who commit it. But pain rarely speaks with wisdom at first. Then came the wedding. Barely 2 months after the divorce filing, Ethan and Vanessa married in a private ceremony at a vineyard in Napa. Photos leaked online within hours. Vanessa wore a fitted ivory gown. Ethan smiled with the posture of a man convinced he had won. The guest list included several mutual friends, 2 of Ethan's cousins, and 1 former neighbor who had once asked Olivia for gardening advice every spring. Captions praised destiny and second chances. Olivia looked at the screen and felt something inside her become very still. Grief was leaving. Clarity was arriving. Whatever she had loved was already gone long before the papers were served. The wedding merely confirmed the timeline. 3 days later, her phone rang from an unfamiliar number. The voice introduced himself as Michael Harrington, counsel for the estate of Henry Carter. He requested Olivia attend a private meeting regarding unresolved testamentary matters. She almost declined. Ethan, she assumed, would handle whatever remained of his father's modest estate. Perhaps a few savings accounts, furniture, sentimental items. Michael insisted gently that her presence was necessary and specifically requested by written instruction. Curiosity overcame exhaustion. 2 mornings later, Olivia entered a downtown law office expecting paperwork and condolences. Instead, she was led into a conference room where 2 attorneys, an accountant, and a woman from a wealth management firm were already seated. On the table sat multiple binders labeled Carter Holdings. The first hour felt unreal. Henry Carter, the man who clipped coupons and drove an aging sedan, had quietly accumulated extraordinary wealth over decades. Through early manufacturing acquisitions, commercial real estate purchased before market booms, disciplined reinvestment, and ownership stakes in logistics companies, his assets had grown beyond anything Ethan had imagined. There were office towers in 3 states, industrial land, private equity interests, municipal bonds, art holdings, and a trust structure designed to preserve privacy. Preliminary valuation placed the estate near $1.8 billion. Olivia listened with the detached sensation of hearing another family's story. She remembered Henry fixing his own gutters at 74 and bringing generic cookies to Christmas dinner. Wealth had never announced itself because he had no need for applause. Then came the question that mattered most. Why was she there? Michael opened a sealed letter of instruction and explained that Henry had revised his will 6 months before death after material concerns regarding the judgment and conduct of his son. Additional memoranda documented these concerns in detail. Henry believed Ethan's relationship with money had become corrosive, and he feared sudden inheritance would intensify the worst parts of his character. He had also recorded observations suggesting Ethan was involved in a secret relationship while still married. Olivia's pulse quickened. Henry had known. Perhaps not every detail, but enough. The old man many dismissed as quiet had seen the currents beneath the surface more clearly than anyone. When the formal reading began, Ethan and Vanessa entered late. Their confidence arrived before they did. Vanessa wore cream-colored tailoring and the composed smile of someone expecting photographs. Ethan greeted no one warmly, only nodding at the attorneys as if impatient to begin. Then he noticed Olivia seated at the far end of the table. Surprise flickered, then irritation. He asked why she was there. Michael replied, by instruction of the decedent. Those 5 words changed the room. Ethan laughed lightly and said his father always loved theatrics. Vanessa squeezed his hand under the table, certain abundance was minutes away. The will opened with charitable bequests, scholarships, hospital donations, veteran support funds, long-serving staff bonuses. Ethan shifted impatiently. Then came a smaller personal clause. To Ethan Carter, the sum of $1. Attached was a written statement approved for reading aloud. For confusing entitlement with worth and convenience with loyalty. The silence afterward felt physical. Ethan stood halfway from his chair, face flushed, demanding explanation. Vanessa stared at the attorneys as though waiting for the real document to emerge. None did. Michael continued calmly. Several contingent trusts were terminated due to breach clauses tied to deception and misconduct. Then he read the principal transfer clause. The controlling share of the estate, associated voting interests, and designated personal properties were to pass into a managed trust benefiting Olivia Carter. Vanessa gasped first. Ethan shouted second. Olivia said nothing because language had abandoned her. Michael continued reading Henry's reasoning. To the person who offered care without expectation, dignity without audience, and steadiness when no reward existed. Ethan pounded the table and accused the firm of fraud, coercion, manipulation. He claimed Olivia had turned his father against him. Vanessa cried loudly, insisting Henry barely knew Olivia compared with family. Michael responded by placing 3 journals on the table. Henry's handwriting filled years of entries. Dates, observations, conversations, concerns. There were notes about Ethan asking repeatedly whether the house was fully paid off. Notes about Vanessa lingering in hallways with Ethan after guests left. Notes about Olivia arriving alone to help during illness while Ethan canceled visits. Henry had not acted impulsively. He had documented character over time. What shattered Ethan most was learning the will had been changed after Henry personally observed him kissing Vanessa outside a restaurant months before the funeral. A private investigator later confirmed repeated meetings during periods when both claimed to be elsewhere. Henry had not confronted them publicly. He simply altered the future quietly. Some people seek revenge through drama, others through paperwork. Ethan lunged for the journals and was warned by security already stationed outside. Vanessa shifted instantly from outrage to pleading, insisting love is complicated and mistakes happen. But mistakes rarely require months of lies, secret travel, and strategic timing around inheritance. News leaked within days. Someone from the legal office spoke too freely, or a family guest sold details to tabloids. Headlines exploded across business blogs and gossip sites. Billionaire leaves son $1. Ex-wife inherits after affair scandal. Public fascination was immediate because the story satisfied 2 ancient appetites at once: wealth and justice. Comment sections celebrated Olivia as if she had masterminded events, though in truth she had merely survived them. Vanessa's social media pages flooded with criticism until comments were disabled. Brands she partnered with quietly ended relationships. Friends who attended the Vineyard wedding suddenly remembered scheduling conflicts and distanced themselves. Social circles built on appearances can evaporate faster than morning fog. Ethan tried lawsuits first. Multiple firms declined after reviewing the estate structure and documentation. He then tried family pressure, calling cousins to argue Henry had been manipulated in old age. The journals and medical competency evaluations destroyed that narrative quickly. He tried media sympathy, claiming a private family matter was being sensationalized. Interviews ended badly when reporters asked about the affair timeline. Finally, stripped of legal leverage and public support, he tried the oldest strategy left, returning to the person he had wounded. One rainy evening, 6 months after serving divorce papers, Ethan stood at Olivia's front door holding flowers chosen by someone who did not know her taste. He looked older, thinner, less polished. Vanessa had left weeks earlier after money failed to materialize and scrutiny became relentless. Ethan spoke in the language of regret. He said he had been confused. He said Vanessa manipulated him during grief. He said he now understood who had truly stood beside him all those years. He said they could rebuild if Olivia was willing. She listened quietly, then asked one question so direct it emptied the script from his face. If Henry had died broke, would you be here? Ethan looked down before answering because silence was the only honest response left. Olivia thanked him for finally giving her one. Then she closed the door. Among the personal items Henry left Olivia was a sealed envelope marked to be delivered after the estate transfer. Inside was a handwritten letter. He apologized for involving her in family pain she never created. He explained that money had tested everyone around him for years, often without their knowledge. I could not choose the character of my son, he wrote, but I could choose where trust should go. He told her wealth can become a prison when used to impress people and a tool when used to free people. He ended with a line she would carry for life. Do not use this to become larger than others. Use it to become more useful. Olivia did something many expected and one thing almost no one predicted. She did not spend years chasing revenge. She hired competent advisors Henry had pre-selected, learned the businesses carefully, and stabilized operations without trying to prove herself through reckless change. She funded scholarships for women returning to work after divorce. She expanded grants for caregiver support after remembering the unpaid emotional labor so many carry quietly. She sold the sprawling mansion Ethan once coveted and moved to a smaller waterfront property where privacy mattered more than display. She traveled, rested, and discovered how peaceful life becomes when no one in it is pretending to love you. People often imagine justice as punishment falling on the guilty. Sometimes it looks different. Sometimes justice is watching those who used you lose access to you forever. Sometimes it is building a life so steady their chaos can no longer reach it. Ethan eventually found work in sales for a mid-sized firm far from the circles he once tried to impress. Vanessa resurfaced in another city, introducing herself to new people who knew nothing of Napa, funerals, or wills. Their names continued, but the story they tried to write together had already ended. As for Olivia, when asked years later whether she hated them, she answered with unusual calm. For a while, yes. Then I realized hate keeps you tied to people who already took enough. She said the hardest part was not losing a husband or a friend. It was accepting that both had likely been gone long before she knew it. Yet she also said betrayal sometimes clears paths loyalty would have kept blocked forever. She had loved honestly and been wounded for it. But honesty left her able to sleep, to rebuild, and to inherit more than money. She inherited proof that character still matters, even when no one thinks anyone is watching. Before we end, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. And tell us this. If someone betrayed you, then fate handed you everything afterward, would you forgive them or walk away forever?